Today we're going to be using the NYC emergency notifications, and basically we're going to building a iOS app that basically can show us all the emergency notifications that New Yorkers might. And we're getting this access to this data by going to pretty much NYC Open Data. This is pretty much URL right here. I'm going to put the link in the description so you can use it too. But again, this is just a way how you can get all those emergency notifications that the state in New York might get. So I'm gonna give you an example of what this data looks like. So I'm just gonna click on data here, and you'll see that we can see the different types of notifications. So it could be a transportation notification, and you see right here it's saying road reopened or some type of notification issue like that. Or we might see an emergency activity right here, and it's gonna say like tree alarm, fire, beach, avenue, and then it gives them, that's for the title, and then for the body it will give like more information like emergency personnel are on the scene of what is known as a 3-alarm fire, etc. So pretty much any type of alarm that's public that New Yorkers might be getting. So let's start coding now. So we're gonna go to Xcode and we're gonna hit create a new project, and for this I'm just gonna call this NYC emergencies. Emergency. Let's put Swift right here. I don't want to put that, but you don't have to put that. You can you can name it whatever you kind of really want to name it. I'm just doing that one, and I will just add that in. And then I'm going to maximize my screen right now. We see like pretty much our simulator here, and we know it's live since if I type anything here, it pretty much updates in this view over there. So now what I'm going to do is, if you know me and you watch my previous streams, if you don't, I love using tab views. So I'm going to add a tab view here. And now what I'm going to do is create a new folder. And this is going to be like the emergency screen stuff. So we'll say emergency view. And then in here, I'll create a new SwiftUI view called emergency view without the space. And then we get this. So now basically this is gonna be the screen that I actually build the UI in, or how the app looks in. Then I'm gonna jump back over to content view, which is our main view, excuse me, and that's a tab view. And then I'm gonna paste this here, our screen right there. And you see we see the same hello world that we saw on the previous screen because it is it. And now I'm gonna add a tab view, tab item, and I'll call this vstack. Let's say image. And then for emergency, I'm wondering what image we could put here. I don't know if there's an alarm image, maybe. Not the one I was looking for, but let's put that there for now. And then right here, I'll put text, and I'll just say emergency. Right? So now we have our basic tab view here. I'm gonna change the alarm, but for now, let's just run this just to make sure everything is actually running as we expect. Maximize Xcode here. Just want to see the visual just to make sure not seeing any weird errors or anything like that, but we should be good. Okay, cool. So we do see the actual simulator loading and we see the tab here. Cool, for the simulator. Let's close that. And as I said, I wanted to use a different icon versus this image here. So let's just go to our SF symbols, which is free from Apple and provides us with a ton of images, icons that you can use. I don't really show yet. Let's just do a bulb, like a light bulb, and maybe later we'll change it, but I know I don't want the arm. Okay, let's just do a light bulb here, and then you can pick whatever system image you want to do. And the reason that didn't upload is because we have to refresh the preview. Now let's jump to the juicy part that we want. So let's start building out our service so that we can get the actual data from the API. So we're going to first create a new folder. And we're going to call this emergency services. And then we'll create a new file, SwiftUI file. And we're going to pretty much call that the same thing, but without a space, obviously. I'll say emergencies right there. And then here, I'm going to start by creating a protocol. And if you watch my tutorials before, my streams, you'll know that like I like using protocols to represent like our service, because it makes it easier for testing. So now I'll say fetch emergencies That's what I'm going to call this function. And for this, we're going to be using Swift Concurrency. So we have to mark this with an async. And then also we want to handle our errors by throwing an error. So we have to mark it with throws. All right. So now the next thing that we have to do is basically we want to get back an array of emergencies so that we can show them inside our view, right? So to do that, we have to jump back to the website. And now when I'm here, basically if you're on the about section or the data section, doesn't matter. Just click on this actions button here and then click on API. And then let's copy the API endpoint here. And now I'm going to open a new window, a new tab, and I'm going to paste that how that URL looks. And this is going to be our, you zoom in. So this is going to be basically the data that we're going to get from our API. So again, it's the same thing that we had in the table, that data here. And now we just need to create a model to represent that data inside our SwiftUI view. All right, so what we're going to do now is jump over here and we're going to create a new folder. We're going to call this models. And then we're going to say new file, models. And again, next we're going to say struct. And then I'm going to call this NYC emergent, or we could just say emergence. Now let's say NYC emergencies. And we'll do that. And then for record ID, we're just going to take it's not that many parameters and they're all strings. So we're just going to take all of them. Usually I try to look to see what we really need, but we could take all of these. The record ID, we make this a string, and we could do date and time. Weird name for a date parameter, but whatever. And then we'll just do its notification time. Copy this. And then the next thing is notification title. Not sure why they use a lot of snake types, but you know, it's alright. SwiftUI actually has a way how we can even though it's like a snake type, we can decode it as camel types, but I might show you later, depending on how long we get with this stream. So now what we're seeing is we basically have this model that can represent our entire data here, right? So we're gonna get an error if we just try to decode the data like this. So we have to add a new protocol. We have to make our model conform to this extra protocol called decodable. And that is so that the tool that we use, the JSON decoder, can convert this data that we have over here to our type of model that we want. So you're gonna see that in a bit, but let's maximize this again. And now we have our model that can represent our data. Now we'll jump to services again. And now we can complete our protocol function, because now we know what we want it to return, which is an array of NYC emergencies. So I don't know if I should pluralize that. Should I just say NYC emergency array of NYC, whatever. So now I'll say class, and then I'll say emergency services simple, and this is going to be the class that actually conforms to emergency services. Right? Enter here. I don't know why all the curly braces pop up, but we got it. And now, because we made that the class conforms to this protocol, now we have to pretty much implement it. So we'll just have to say fetch emergencies, right? And now we have an empty function that is expecting us to return an array of emergencies. So we're gonna keep getting this error until we satisfy it by returning some type of array of emergency or throw an error. We have to write a ton of stuff before we return some actually. So for now, let's just make it return an empty array just to silence that error right there. All right, cool. So now, remember we copied that URL. So let's copy it again, just in case I copied some stuff over it, which I did. And we're gonna create a new property here. We're gonna call it private let endpoint, make it a string. And then we're gonna do that. Right. So now we have access to our endpoint inside our service class. Now, the first thing we need to do is, remember we said our functions can throw an error. So we want to create our own type of errors that might occur. So we're going to say like enum, and then we're going to call this emergency service, emergency error. Emergency error. And then we're going to make this conform to the error type. And now whenever we want to throw an error, we can throw an error based on our custom error. And I'm going to put NYC here. I don't know, I feel like it's missing something. You can name it whatever you want though. And then for my first case, I'll do invalid URL. And then, you know, that's when we try to convert this. And then we could do another one, which we did in our previous stream, invalid response. Then we'll do case, and then we'll add a custom one here. So what we are going to do now is basically use this and convert this endpoint, which is a string, to a URL. So to do that, we'll say something like guard let URL. And then we'll say URL. And we're going to use the type that requires a string so that we can pass in our endpoint. Right. And now we'll say else, not return, but throw an error. I'm going to say NYCM emergency error. And then for this, remember we're dealing with the URL. So if you get an error here, or you fail to convert a string to a URL, that would be an invalid URL error. Nice. Now the next thing we have to do is actually use this URL to actually get the data from the API. So to do that, all we have to do is first say like, right, what we will get. So it's going to be a data response. And then we're going to say like equal, and then we're going to say URL session. So this is what we're going to use, shared. And we're going to say data task, and we have to look for the one that requires a URL. I can't use this one because it requires a URL request. And we want to use the one that requires async. So go down to this one that's the async throws. And then I'm going to throw in a URL in here. And we're going to see a couple errors pop up. So the first one is saying that call can throw because it's not marked with a try. We'll add that try in, and then we're going to get one more that says expression is async, but it's not marked with a await. So we just add in the await. So the errors should disappear now. But the issue is, as it said before, this call, like URL session, just share that data. It can throw an error, and we're not really trying to catch that anywhere. So what we're going to do is cut this line for a second, and we're going to throw it inside a do catch. That way we can handle whatever error might be thrown inside our do catch. So if the error does occur, we'll get it in our catch block right here. And if no error occurs, we'll just be in our do block chain. So the next thing is, when we use URL session to get the data, we get two things back in a tuple. A data and a response. The data is what we're going to convert to our emergency response, right? Array emergency response, but we get this other thing called a response. So we have to check our response first just to make sure it's a valid response. So a valid response would be like 200, or a bad one would be like, you know, when you're using an app and it says like 404, that's a bad one, or it says 500, that's another bad one. So we want to check for only the good ones. So to do that, we have to say like HTTP URL response. And then this response that we have here, which is option click, a URL response, we are going to convert it to a HTTP URL response. And this type is what pretty much really has a property on it called status code, which is those codes that I mentioned before, like 500, 404, and the good ones, 200, are between 299. So we know the good ones are between 200 and 299. So we want to check that our status code is one of those. So to do that, we'll check if that range has what our status code is. So we'll say like HTTP URL response status code, right? And if it does have this, then we'll just continue and ignore this else block. Scroll up some more so I'm not blocking. Hope I wasn't blocking you off for too long. Sorry about that. And now for this portion here, I'll say throw. And then I'll say API, no, NYC emergency error. And then remember we have an invalid response. So we'll throw that error there when that happens. Nice. So let's scroll up some more. And now the next thing that we're seeing is we have so if we pass all of this and we get here, that means we have a good response. So now we can start using our data. So what we want to do is decode or transform our data, because this type right here, data, oh, wrong button. This type right here is a data type, but this is not what we want. We want this, an array of emergencies, NYC emergencies. So for me to do that, I have to use someone called a JSON decoder. So I'll say let emergencies, and then I'll say JSON decoder dot decode. And basically I have to do two things here. I have to put the data that I want to decode, which is this right here, we got from the API. And then I have to put what I want to transform it or decode it to. So I want to transform it to an array of NYC emergency. So I'll put that here. That'll right there. And now we are able to get our emergency. The only issue that we're seeing here is that this call can throw. So to fix that, we can put it in a try. Another thing that we could do too is we could put this extra step inside another do catch, but we don't have to necessarily, because this catch block will catch it. But honestly, I like doing it because it's faster for me to find whenever, say, this call might fail or I might get an error. It's easier to track it. And I found with like a lot of the NYC open data endpoints, sometimes some values might be nil, and then you might be expecting it, and then you hit an error. So this kind of helps with handling that. So I'm going to cut this, and I'm going to paste this here, and I'm going to say catch. And yeah, so right now we're not handling the catch blocks. We'll do that in a second, but let's handle the successful case. So we decode the data, and we can get emergencies. Let's look at this type, NYC emergencies, array of NYC emergencies. So now we can just return it. Return emergencies. Now, yeah. So now what we're gonna do is basically handle our catch blocks here. So we can get rid of this safety that we're doing for just showing an empty array. So we can get rid of that. And now we have to handle for both of our catch blocks. So this one and this one. So remember, we have an extra enum case for our emergency error. So we will just have to say then throw this emergency error. Emergency error, and we'll use custom. Then we're going to use the error that we get from every catch block that's pretty much used. I didn't create this type, it's just provided to us inside a catch block. And I'm going to pretty much use this one again in my other catch block. So we have a catch block that will catch if we get decode errors fail, and we have another one that's set up to catch other type of errors that might occur. So now basically we have our API or service layer set up to get the data. Yeah. All right. So next, what we want to do is jump back to our emergency view, right? And we still have this basic view in here, but it's all right. We're gonna fill this out in a second. So what we're gonna do now is we want a way how we can use our services, our emergency. This shouldn't be you. This should be emergency services info. Quick name change here. So we want a way how we can use like a type that conforms to emergencies in our view to get this, so how we can get the data using our services layer. And so the logic for that is pretty much here. So to do that, jump back, we're going to need a view model since we're going to go with the MVVM approach. So we'll start by creating a view model in here. I'm going to say new file. I'm going to make it a Swift file. And I'm going to say emergency. one emergency view model. And now all I have to do is say class emergency view model. We'll make this conform to observable object. And we're doing that so we can listen for different changes that might happen and make them show up inside our view. This will make more sense in a couple seconds if it does right now, but just chill out and keep relaxing. So now our emergence, now we have this emergency view model, but it needs to be able to use our service so that we can use that service and then show data in our view. So how we have to do this is something called dependency injection. So we want to make it that this view model has access to our services. So let's give it a property and let's just call this services. And then it's going to be of the type NYC emergency service. I just call it emergency services. Yeah, emergency services. And it's gonna be flagging me for error because I haven't initialized it. So I'll just hit init and then beautiful autocomplete handles that for us. Nice, right? So, but notice I'm using the protocol version of this. I'm not using, I'm using the protocol version here. I'm not using the class itself. And the reason for that is because that will help with testing, for, especially with dependency injection. So we can use like mock versions of stuff, of classes. All right, so another thing that we could do is I don't want, every time I call emergency view model, I don't want to have to initialize this every time with our emergency services. So I can add what I'm going to do is add a default value here. Emergency services info. Now this is the actual class that we created. Now we would only really rely on using the default value when we're not running unit tests. Otherwise, we're going to pass in our own. Anyways, let's start by creating our first function, and this is going to be a function to fetch emergencies. Emergencies, yeah. And right. So we're going to start so remember our services function, which we're going to call, which is fetch emergencies, just a couple things. So it's asynchronous and it can throw an error. I remember if someone can throw an error, it's usually best if we put it inside like a do catch block. Let's do that. So we can handle catch whatever error it might cause. So emergencies. And we'll say again, try await. Since this is an asynchronous function that we're gonna call. And it can throw, it also throws. So that's why we do the try part. And then because it's asynchronous, that's why we do the await part. So now we would have gotten that data. What we want to do is print that data. In this case, I'm going to use dump. Dump is pretty much like print. It's just that when it shows it in the console, it's much more readable. It's way more easier to read. So you see we get another error here where it's saying async calling a function that does not support concurrency. That's just saying that this is an asynchronous call and I'm using in a function that, it doesn't have support for that. So to fix this, all I have to do is just say async. Make the function asynchronous now. It support concurrency. All right, cool. So it's complaining because I haven't added a catch block. So let's just do this. And voila, error goes away. So for now, let's just print what this error is. I don't really care about that. What we want to check is, are we actually getting this data? So what we can do is basically say inside our emergency view, which is this right here, we are going to make it that it requires a view model so that then we can make this function call. We can call this function and then print if we have some emergencies. So let's do that by introducing our view model to emergency view. So we'll say like add state object, and then we'll say var view model, and then we'll say emergency view model, right? And the preview is gonna require it, and we'll just pass in the default value for services. All right, so now we have an emergency view model here, and we've basically marked it with a state object. And we're doing this because You see, remember how we added an observable object here, and then we added a state object here? It's basically setting up our view model to be able to show any change that the view model might make right away inside our view. If that doesn't make sense right now, it's cool. I'm gonna give you a perfect example. But basically, it's a way how we can listen for changes and then show them in the view. So let's do a couple things. So right now, all we're gonna do is on this text that is pretty much the view itself, we're just gonna add a on up here. Actually, let's just add a VStack. So we're gonna embed this in a VStack. So copy it and then right click or double tap. And then we're gonna go to embed in VStack and it just throws that in a VStack. One other thing, I think we can we do navigation stack? Oh, they need to add navigation stack to this. Anyways, so what we have to do now, remember, is just call the function from the view model. So we're gonna add a modifier here. And it's gonna be a .task. And a modifier is a way how you can add special abilities to your view or give it additional features to your view. So we're gonna call our view model function that we have. So it's gonna be fetch emergencies. And again, because it's asynchronous, remember, we have to mark it with await. But the one that we're calling doesn't throw an error. That's why I didn't put try there. So now what we want to do is whenever the screen, and then what .task does is like, whenever the screen appears, it will do whatever is inside the function for it to do. So I want it to, as soon as the screen runs, I want to call this function. So when we call it, this is a function that's gonna get called. And again, we just want to see if the data is being decoded properly. All right, so let's set a breakpoint here. Set a breakpoint here. And we could also jump to services, right? I remember, as I said, I like to have a separate catch block just for my decoder block. So I'm gonna set one right here just in case we hit an error, and then one more here. So now if we run this, we're gonna call that function. Oh, we're missing one. Oh yeah, add the missing property here. Emergency view model. That. Now run again. Okay, so it does get hit. And oh no. Okay, cool. I don't know why it's taking so long. All right, so basically it did hit an error. I had a feeling something like this was gonna happen. And I think more likely the reason for this, let me maximize this. So you see it's hitting our JSON decoder block, and this is why I like to add my do catch just around this, also around our JSON decoder separately. So we're gonna look at what this error is, and I feel like it's gonna be because a value from the API is nil, but we're saying that it's supposed to be there. So right now, maximize this. We see all this stuff right here, right? Anyways, just come right here and it says no value associated with coding key email body. So what's that saying is that email body property, which is this, we have it that it's a string, like, yo, this will always be there. But it seems like the fact that we're getting this error says that email body might not be there. How we can handle this is by putting this as an optional and then trying to run again. But the same scenario might honestly happen for any of these other values. And I've seen this happen a lot with some of these APIs. The thing is, pretty much it's like, I've seen it looks like the APIs get updated. So some values weren't present originally and then they got added later. So now let's jump back to Xcode. And you see that the breakpoint hit right here inside our do block, which means that's a success. So it really was just that email body parameter that was nil for one case, or whichever case it was nil for. So now we see that we got here, so that means we're able to decode the data. So let's look at this type, NYC emergencies, and now we're gonna dump that data. So watch the console here, because it's gonna be a ton of stuff. Yeah. Xcode. Okay. So now I'll stop this. And then you see some of the data. You see for this model, we have the ID, the date, the type, the title, and the email body. So now this is great because that means that we were able to decode our data. So now we have access to this API, all this data that we have here. We have access to all of this inside our app, inside a model that we can use easily. So now that we know that this is working, we can get rid of dumping it. So we don't need to print that right now. What we want to do instead is show the emergencies in our view. So right now inside our SwiftUI view, if we jump back here, you can see that all we're doing is just showing this text. So let me run our preview so you can see some visuals as I'm doing this. Yeah, so we're just showing this text right here. So I don't want to just show the text, so I'll say I want to show a list of stuff. So I'll go with just a basic list for now. And for now, I'll just put in this emergency. All right, I see the list kind of appears, and then I'll add one more so you can see what this list is going to probably look like. There. See, like it's just different rows. We can also change like how the list looks. So I could change it to this style. And I could hit, and this is another modifier again, remember? So we're adding a new feature, a new ability to the view. And I'm gonna try, let's try insert group. I think insert group is the default one. Let's try a different one. Let's try group. So it kind of does it in that way. Let's test this out. I haven't really messed with this way in a while. So what we're gonna do now is, as I said, we don't want to just show this. We don't want to show some static data here. So what we want to do is actually get the data that we got here, which is emergencies, and use that inside our view. So how we can do that then is, this is going to kind of explain why we made, we added that observable stuff right here, observable object, and then our state object here inside our view. So what we want to do is we're going to add a publish variable. So say published var, I'm just call this emergencies. It's gonna be of type, well, yeah, NYC emergency. And it's gonna be an empty array. All right, so it starts off as empty array. And the reason why we made this publish is basically whenever this gets some data or some data changes in it, whichever view is using it will automatically update and show that change. So if this array was empty and the view was already showing just an empty array, if we eventually got some data 5-10 seconds later, the view would then say, oh, you just got some data, and start showing all of that new set of emergencies. That's why we mark this with published. So what we're going to do then is use this type of emergencies instead of creating one here. So we'll just move that, right? And now what we can do to help with this is jump back to our emergencies view. And we're going to make it that this list takes new model that emergencies. All right. And we are probably going to get an error here. And then we're going to make it that it returns some type of emergency. And so we're going to get an error here. Yeah, this one. And it's saying that to use an array like this inside a list with UI, we have to make it conform to identifiable. So to fix this, we just have to jump to our model right here. And you see the same way like how we had to make this, our struct conform to decodable, we also have to make it conform to something called identifiable, right? So now what we can do is, the requirement for identifiable is basically that whatever struct that has to have a parameter called ID. So what we could do, really quick way, is say let ID and then have it equal to a UUID. So we basically give it some type of ID that's created that will make it unique. And you see we get rid of the error just like that. We get rid of that error just like that. So the next thing we're going to do is basically put in a VStack. And this is basically what each row is going to look like. So say like VStack text. So like emergency, I think it's like title. Station type, yeah, title. And then let's see what a view looks like. What's up with our preview? Okay, so you see our preview now, and it shows a title for each emergency that might be happening. Right? So that's good. So what we could do, let's look at our data again. And you see that it has title that we just used right here. And we put that there. And then it has an email body. But this one is pretty short. Oh, actually it's not, like really long. So some of them are really long, like this one example. There's no way it's going to be helpful to show all of that data to the user at one time on like the first screen right here. That doesn't make it, to me at least. So what we're going to do instead is show some of that email body data. So to do this, we're going to say text. I'm going to say emergency body, which is email body. And basically it's going to flag us that basically this is optional, which we did just make it optional. So we can just do like Turner right now for now. And what will happen? So you see how it's huge. So we have the title here, and then we have this blob of data, and it's just confusing, right? We're going to make some quick changes just to help with reading this. So the first thing I'm noticing is that the alignment is to the center, and that's by default whenever you use a VStack. To fix that, just add a new parameter, an alignment parameter, and then just make it leading, right? Alignment. Okay, you see it goes over to the left. The other thing is that it's hard to tell like the title from the body, so let's just add a different font. Let's make this title, how big is title? Let's see how big is title. Title is huge, we don't need that. All right, so let's do title 3. Preview can take so long to load sometimes. I think it's because this is a huge data set. So what we could do is let's just run this. Oh, we just said preview pause. We run it. Okay, it's finally showing up there. The reason it's taking a while is because, as I said, the data set's huge. Okay, so we see this. It's a bit bigger, and it kind of is somewhat easier to tell. So we can remove that from there. And we see a couple things. So this error occurred only because like I closed the simulator before closing in Xcode. So we're good. But what we're going to do now is wait for this data to load. As you see, it finally loads. And what we want to do is, so the title is up there, and we can kind of see that it's larger, but I want to also add some padding, and then I want to make the title bold. So let's do that. So I'll say bold, and then I'll add some bottom padding, and I'll make bottom padding be about 5. And then it has to fetch the simulator fetching data forever. Okay. So we get it now. You can kind of tell the difference here, right? You see the title a bit different from pretty much the email body. So the next thing that we want to do is cut down the amount of data that we're showing right here. But to fix this, we'll just go back to this text and we'll say line limit, and we'll set that to 2. So the most lines we want to see that text go for are 2. So you see how it kind of shrinks it right now? The less data that we're seeing on the screen. And that's good for now, because all you want to do is make it that the user can tap on it, and then when they tap on it, they go to a different, or they tap on, either they go to a different screen or they see a sheet come up that has that data. So before we do that, let's address this issue that we mentioned, where it said publishing changes from background thread is not allowed. Make sure to publish from the main thread. So the reason we're seeing this error is because, and you see it even flags it over here, Xcode. Like, yo, you have to fix this. Yo, hurry up, fix this. The reason why it's saying this is because, like, basically we're getting data, right? We're getting it asynchronously, and we're trying to push this to asynchronously update the UI view, the Swift UI view. So we don't want to do that. Any changes that you're making to update the UI should be done on the main thread. So to fix this, all we have to do is add a main actor decorator here to our function. And now if I run this again, and then I scroll around, let me just run it again. And then I'm going to scroll around for a bit. Fetching the data, that's why it's taking some time. All right, so I'll scroll around for a bit. And you see, we don't see that warning anymore. We're good on that front. So the next thing I want to do though is you notice that like the data takes forever to load. It's sometimes we're on the screen and we don't know what's happening. We don't know if data is loading or what. So to fix that, we can add a spinner to show as we're fetching the data. So we could do that by adding another publish variable here. Publish var is loading. And we'll say a boolean. Set this to false actually. And then at the top here, I'll say is loading. I'll set this to true. Basically, so we want to show the spinner right when we're fetching that data. And basically we want to hide the spinner after. So we could say is loading is equal to false. So then as soon as after we get the data, just hide the spinner. Oh, right before we get the data, keep showing me the spinner. And we want to add this to the catch block too, because if say we started fetching the data and we get an error, we started fetching the data and we got an error, we want to stop showing the spinner too, right? So I'll say is loading. I'm gonna set this equal to false. And now that we have like some type of, remember, because it's published, anytime this variable changes, the view will update to whatever it needs to do. Let's jump back to emergency view, right? And now we're going to add another modifier and give it the ability to show, give it the overlay ability. What we're going to say here is if view model that is loading, right? We're going to show a progress view, which is that spinner. And then we're going to make it that it has some type of string that says what's happening. Fetching emergencies in NYC. And I feel like I want to add a alert here. Not alert, emoji. Where's that alarm emoji? Red one. If I just type in alarm. Yeah, this one. I'm gonna show this, fetching it. And now if I run this again, I see that fetching emergencies NYC, so I know it's doing something now. I'm not just like, why is the screen white? Okay, so fetching it, the API takes forever because it's a huge data set. I'm going to show you a way how you can limit it though. Like it's fetching. Looks like we did catch one error here. So let's see. Error. And it looks like we got an invalid response. So I think this might just be because we got the status code. I think because the data set is just so huge. So what we're gonna do is run it one more time, and if we still get that, we're gonna add like a limit on it. Fetching emergency. Okay, so it was fine this time. But you see that like because the data set is so huge, it could probably take like a while, right? So one thing we can do, I think, is like say $sign here, and we're gonna add something called a limit. And let's try with just 3. And let's run it again. So now we're saying we only want to get 3 emergencies. And you see how it, just like that, it appeared mad fast. And if I should cut it down to 100, because before we were getting 1,000 sets of data. So I cut it down to 100, and it's doing some work. It's still kind of slow, but we got that. So I feel like 100 is okay for now. And we could edit pretty much the URL using like URL requests or URL components. But just for simplicity, I'll just keep it to the endpoints here. All right, so now we've limited our data that we're getting to 100 just so that we can see the data a bit faster. So now what we want to do is jump back to our emergency view here. And we know we're seeing that progress view, that spinner, which is fine. But you see all of this data that we have here for the view, it's like a lot, you know? So what the best thing to do for this is cutting it and putting it in its own separate view. Let's just cut this. And then we're going to add a new folder here called emergency row. This is going to be the view for the emergency row view. Emergency row. And we'll say new SwiftUI view. Emergency row view. And then that same stuff that we copied, yo, we're just gonna plop that right here. And we're gonna get some errors. So it's saying like, yo, I have no idea what emergency is. So we need to basically tell the view what emergency is. So we will say let emergency. And then this will just be NYC emergency. Now it kind of knows what this is, but our preview wants that data too. So let's just give it. So we'll say record, we have an ID, let's say 1, daytime. I'm just gonna, let's just grab it from the API. So let's grab some type of daytime. Let's grab this one. Notification type, let's grab transportation. Grab this one. Oh, this is way too, I'm already at the end, so I'll just grab it. Okay, I'll grab this. Probably gonna give me a, no, it didn't. Now, if we maximize and load up our preview, so again, our preview is gonna be using whatever is inside this section here. So if we load this up, we're gonna see the data linked to this section. So you see like it's kind of to the edges pretty much, but when we were inside the emergency view, it was preview is acting up. Oh yeah, I didn't see the emergency row view, so I'll add this in here. Sorry, emergency row view, and add an emergency. And now when it's spinner, we can see it. So you see how we have this padding here automatically on next for each thing inside the row, around the row. But when we go to just the actual row view, there's no padding. It's like itched up right under it. So we don't want to add extra padding here because inside this view exactly, because then it's gonna add too much padding to the parent view. Instead, what we're gonna do is add the padding to the preview section right here. So let's scroll down. And we're just gonna add a padding modifier. And now it should look kind of close to what we had in the previous screen. Cool. So now this looks pretty decent to me. The only thing that we do have, we have another property called emergency type. And it's basically just like a quick, we have 2 more properties. So we have date and time and we have emergency type. So let's see if we can add those values in. But the next thing is we want to be able to show the date and the type. So I'm thinking for the type, we could add like a little tab here. Let's just see if we can do this now. So we'll say like text, we'll say emerge preview, so, and then we'll say emergency, and then we'll say notification type. Scroll down so you can see that. Yeah, so I'm just adding a text here, and then I'm going to say emergency that notification type, and now we see that right there it says transportation. Let's add some padding below this. Padding. Then we're going to put it to the bottom, pushing that down a bit. And then let's make it that the type looks different because we want to be able to see right away, like, what is this emergency about? Let's add like a kind of background around it. So we'll say something like background. And then we'll add in some type of color. And let's make this green. You see, it adds that kind of background to it, but it's too close to it. So I'm going to add a padding. And I'll give it that background. Also, now the only thing I don't like is that the edges are too sharp. So I'm going to add a corner radius. I make it like 4 or something. And now it's like kind of nicely round. Okay. Now this looks pretty good. So the only thing that we want to add now, I'm thinking, is like the date here. Like the date right to this right of it. So if we look at the date from the API, we see that it's in this format. It's in this right here. You zoom in so you can see a little bit. I zoom in more. All right, so it's in this format, and I don't want to show it like this, and I can't really use it that well like this. So what we want to do is transform it to Swift's date type. So you know, like how we have string types or integer types. Swift has this another type called date, so we want to transform it to that. So let's look at where we get this data, right? What we basically need is a function to handle this for us. So to do that, what we could do is we could do two things. We could make it that emergency row view as a function that can handle this by giving it a view model, since we're using MVVM. And I think that's the route we're gonna take. So inside our emergency row, we're gonna add a new file, and we're gonna call this emergency row model. Right, so emergency row view model. Hit that, and then we're gonna add a class in here. Call it the same thing, emergency row view model. We don't need this to be observable object, I guess. And what we're gonna say is we're gonna make it that it requires if. All right, let's make it that it has a function called convert date, right? And it's going to return some type of date that we want. And we're going to basically convert this date and time property to our date type, right? So for now, let's just give it a return of nil, just to quiet that error. And now, since we want to use this emergency row view model with our emergency row view, we have to introduce this view model to our view. So what we can do here is say something like, again, state object, our view model. We could just use a regular without view state, but it's all right. And then we'll say emergency row view model. Now pretty much, oh yeah, because I didn't make other one conform to it. But now the view pretty much has access to our view model. It's just complaining because I didn't do this observable object. So now if I jump back, that error will go away. So you see it goes away. So since we have a view model here and we have a separate property here called emergency, and we're using MVVM for this, so the view shouldn't be doing any extra work besides showing stuff that it's given. So let's get rid of this extra property here for emergency. And we're going to pass that as a requirement for our view model. So that way, whoever wants the emergency row view to show stuff, give it to the view model, and then the view model will pass it to the view. And then, so we'll add the initializer for that. Nice. So now if we jump back to emergency row, you see that we're seeing a ton of errors, and that's because it doesn't know what emergency is. It doesn't know what emergency is, right? That's because, as I said, we passed that emergency requirement to the view model, right? Which is this right here. So now, all we have to do then, instead of calling emergency directly, is use a view model to call it. So view model dot. And we're just going to put that in front of each of those places where we're calling emergency. And then our preview is going to complain to, so let's move the, oh, we're going to still need this. Let's copy the actual model, that portion here, and then remove this and put in view model. And then it's going to ask for emergency row. And then for the emergency that it needs, just paste back what we had before. And this will work fine. Waiting on the preview, come on. Oh, yeah, one more thing. So if we jump to emergency view, you'll see that, yeah, we're still requiring an emergency, but remember we changed that. So it requires now a view model, an emergency row view model, and then that view model requires the emergency, the model. So pass that in there. We should be good now. Oh, we're still running. Okay, cool. You see? So you can see this pretty much the same. Now that emergency row view has its own view model that can handle like any type of extra logic that we want to do. And let me run this actually so you can see how it looks for now, and then I'm going to work on adding in the date right after we're done looking at it. Cool. Yeah, so this is the actual running. We see all this data, we see the tag of what type of emergency it is, whether it's a mass transit restoration or emergency activity or local mass transit, all of them. What we could do is add like certain colors too based on the type, but it'll take a little bit more. So the next thing we're going to do, like I promised, is say again, oh yeah, show the date right here so we can know when did this emergency go out. So there's some cases where it's mentioned in the body, but it's not always, like example here or here. We don't want to rely on the text in the body just doing that. So we're going to stop the simulator and then we're going to open maximize again. All right. And now for the date that we want to show, we have to jump to our emergency row view. And we're going to use something called a date formatter to be able to show this. We're going to say let date formatter equal date formatter, right? And then inside our convert dating here, we're going to use our date formatter to convert the string date that we had. Remember this right here, to a different type. So to do this, we're going to say date formatter, format, right? Date format. And we have to tell it basically what format is the date in, and then it will be like, oh, it's in this format. Okay, I know how to convert it. So what we could do is copy this right here, Command C, and then we'll plop this right here. This is how I do it. I think it's the fastest way. So you see this is numbers. We're just gonna replace this with y, and then you see where this is the month. You can guess it, month. And then you see where this is 24. We're just going to put DD. And then about this T thing now, we have to put these colons. I put that there. And then you see this other parameter where it's 10. Similar method, we have to say HH. And then for minutes, as you could guess, M. Then SS. And I think these are all capital S's. And then so we gave the date format the format that we're kind of expecting. So now we need to see if we can get an actual date from the string that we're going to pass in. So we'll say emergency date. I will say date formatter. And we're going to look for something that says date from this. And see it says returns a date representation of it. Basically, it converts a string to a date. So we're going to say date from, and you see it takes a string. And we have that string. Remember, we have access to the emergency model, right? And the emergency model has this property, date and time. All right, so we're just going to plot that right in here. So we're going to say emergency, that date and time. Right, now we should get some type of data here. It will be emergency data. So let's just see if this works. So the first thing we're going to do is call this function. So what could we call it? We could, just for testing, we're gonna call it one time. Let's see when the view appears. So let's just do unappear, and then we're just gonna say view model dot convert data. So we're just testing to see if we're able to convert the data properly. Actually, don't need a value here. So we're gonna go inside here and we're gonna set this breakpoint, and then whenever a row view appears, it's gonna fire. So minimize for 1 second, and then you see it does appear, and you see from our tab right here that we do have some data. Oh, I'm blocking that. There's no way for me to show you that, so I'll just work it up here. So basically, we got here and we're about to print, you see. So emergency data does have a date type, and we're about to print it. So let me just close this. I'll open up my thing so you can see better. Oh, you can see it now. So you see that emergency date does have a value. It's really small for you, sorry. But when I print it, I'm just going to press next. You see that we get some type here that has the date that we want. Perfect. So now we can stop all of this. And now we know if we go with this method and go with this date format, we can create an date type. So what we're going to do now is remove this returning nil, and now we're going to return emergency date. All right, boom. And this is an optional type, which is fine, but that's what we are returning. You see, optional date type, date type. So now we are going to actually use this. So to use this, you go inside emergency row view, right? I remember emergency row view has access to our view model. We can get rid of this on up here. And we're going to say something like, remember, we want to show, let me load a preview. Let me show you again where we want to show the date. So we want to show the date in the corner, so right across from the type. So we're going to need an H stack to do that. So let's just copy this and double click or right click, and then we're going to say embedded in H stack. All right, and then we'll add a spacer here. And then for over here, this is where we're going to add the date. So remember, the date is optional. So if you don't have the date, or if we couldn't decode the date, let's just not show it. So let's unwrap that date first. So if let emergency date is equal to view model dot convert date, right? So then if we are able to convert, you can get the date, then show this date. And we'll say emergency date, and then we'll pick the style that we want. We want date. Now we can see the date right here. So that looks okay so far. The first thing I'm noticing is that these are not aligned, and I don't like that. So to fix that, I'm going to go to our H stack. I'm going to add an additional parameter, alignment, and I'll make them align top. Oh, so that looks good now. Other thing is that I don't need the date to exactly be in the same color as all of this. I'm going to put it as a secondary color. So I'll say foreground style. Make that secondary. Nice. Other thing I'm thinking is, should we make both of these fonts, all the fonts on the screen, be the same font? So let's see if we can change it to be something like maybe caption. How small is caption? Our call out, how small? Call out actually looks good. So let's just go with call out. So we'll grab this one, call out. And let's scroll up so you can see that. And I'll hit call out right here too. So now the date is a little bit smaller. Now let's run this so that we can see how the view looks now that we can see the dates on them. Okay, look much better. So we can see the type, we can see when this was posted, and we can see the title and whatever for the emergency. So before we could go to where we can click it, and we see a sheet or navigate over out the side, we want to add a title here, and this title is just gonna say like NYC emergency. But to do that, let's minimize, let's maximize, and then let's go to emergency view again, our main screen. And what we're gonna do is all this right here, we're gonna put this inside a navigation stack. So I'm honestly just gonna cut it, the navigation stack, and repost that right back. And now on our V stack, I'll be able to add a navigation title. I'll add a modifier. Hold on. I'll add a modifier here, and I'll say that navigation title text, and then for this I'll just say NYC emergency. I'll just say emergency. Yeah, let's go with these. Right. And if we run this, now we see this title at the top here. I like that. That looks much better. The other thing that we want to do before we do the navigation or the sheet is that we want to be able to show an alert, a pop-up if like say an error occurs. Let's add in logic to handle that. Okay, so let's add in some logic to handle that. So let's jump back to our emergency view model. And then inside here, we have to add a couple properties. So first one is going to be a property called show error alert. It's going to be a boolean. And then the second one is going to be a property called error message. error message. Right? And then where would we go to actually handle our errors in our catch block? So we'll go here, and what we're going to say is, remember, we have a custom error. So we could go to emergency services. I remember we have this custom error, and then we have three different scenarios that we could show, right? So before we do that though, we're going to jump to emergency view models again. And what we're going to do in our catch block is say error message. And we're going to say that is going to be equal to error localized description. And then we're going to toggle show error alert. Remember, this is a published variable. So whenever this gets toggled, we're going to show an alert on the screen. So now let's use this inside our emergency view, right? So we're going to add something called a .alert modifier. And I love using this one right here. And it just takes a Boolean, so a publish Boolean or a binding Boolean. But we can use a publish for this case. And we're going to use show error alert. Add a alert view. Make it take some type of text for the error message you want to show. And we'll just view model the error message. Remember, we set this in our view in our catch block. So to force the API to fail, we could do something like, say, let's just get rid of some of this and then run it. And when it loads, stop that here, you see that we see some error message that appears. And basically it tells us the operation couldn't be completed, blah, blah. Not the most readable error. So what we could do to help with this, right, is we could go back to our service class, which is where we are right now. And we're going to update our custom error right here to handle custom error messages, readable error messages. We'll call this error title. And we'll see string. And then we're going to assign a custom readable error title for each case that we have. Self, and then we'll do return invalid URL. So if we get the invalid URL error, we'll just return that. If we get invalid response, we'll return invalid response error. Then let's change this. And we're going to say return. Something went wrong. Something went wrong. And then we're going to actually use, do a new line here. I'm just being extra. And then our action are going to use our error that we passed in. I remember, where did we pass? Oh, let's scroll down, sorry. For our case block, so I just added another return. It says something went wrong, a new line, and then I have the error that whatever we passed in for custom cases. I remember for custom cases like this right here, we're passing in error.localized description. Now, if I, oh yeah, one more thing. Yo, so one more thing. We're gonna go to emergency view model, and instead of just using the error like this, what we're gonna do instead is convert that error to our custom error. So say let custom error is equal to error as what was it? API error? Service error. I can't remember it. I think it's API error. Or the service error. Oh, let's just look. All right, so call it, oh, NYC emergency error. Yeah, NYC emergency error. And then I'll go down here and I'll say error message. Remember, this is what we're showing in the title for that error. And we're gonna say error message equal custom error, which is our custom error. And we're gonna make it equal to the error type. So depending on what case from our custom error is set, we will get a different type of error title. So now if I run this, you see that we got something that says something went wrong, support unsupported URL. So we're hitting our custom error, this one. Something went wrong, and then Apple's error helps us know. So now let's just fix this, fix back our URL that we're using. I don't remember exactly what it is, so let's just copy this right here. Command C, and then let's just plop it right here back. And then when we run this, it'll be good since we're using back the correct URL. Oh, shouldn't have maximized. Yeah, we should be good. So we're good. So we know that we have a loading spinner that can tell us that the data is taking long to load. We also have an alert that will pop up if we have an error. So nice. The last thing that we're gonna add in here is making it that whenever the user taps on any of these, we see like a sheet comes up from the bottom of the screen, and they can see more information about the email body and, well, the title too. But to do this, we have to jump to our emergency view, right? And then we're looking at this. We're gonna eventually have to add a new modifier, say probably after here, called .sheet. But we have to do a few more things too in our view model. So we'll add another Boolean. I know you're tired of the Booleans, but sorry, we have to need them. So we're gonna add another Boolean, and instead of saying show alert, we'll say show sheet view. Sheet view. So the sheet that we're gonna have slide up, right? So what we could do now with show sheet view is say that basically whenever we tap on this emergency row, which is again each of these rows in here. So if I tap on this, I should see a sheet. Tap on this, I should see a sheet. Basically, I want to make it that whenever I tap on this, I want to see a sheet. So to do that, I can say on top gesture, right? I don't know why I was saying a CG point. We don't need a CG point actually. So we'll just add an on top gesture to our row view. And then what we could do is say that something like view model dot show sheet view. So we toggle it so we get it ready to start showing the actual sheet. Let's add a basic .sheet modifier here. .sheet is, I'm gonna say $, view model show sheet view. And then for the view, let's just add something temporary for now. Let's just say X. Let's just say a sheet. So now if I tap this, you see that we see that just pretty much just pops up. What we really want to show is the sheet showing the matching data for whatever we clicked on. To handle this, right, we need a way to, all right, so first of all, we need a view to decide what we're going to show, right? So we need an emergency detail view or our emergency sheet view. So what we could do now is let's create that view. So let's just make it something really simple. So we'll say like vstack. And then it's going to be real simple. So we're just going to have some title. We're going to make this all centered too. And we would have this be, say, the title. Let's just grab a title. Yeah, so let's just grab, what is this stuff right here? We're going to use actual data. We're just mocking it up right now. And let's just make this font, make it a title, right? And then let's add like something for the email body, which could be this. For this case, I really don't mind if it's long, because we want to test that out, right? Back a bit. I'm gonna kind of Command C, and then right below that, we're just gonna add right below our title. We're just gonna add all that text that we pretty much just copied, and then around our title, let's just add some padding. It's going to be really simple. It's just going to be the title at the top and then the email body at the second, below that. If you want to add some more personal data, feel free to highly encourage it. Like build this out how you envision this app. So I am going to use our preview to click on a row. And you see right here, we see that we basically see kind of what I was expecting. We need to handle the padding here, and we want to push this data up to the top. So for the first part, we just go down to the edge of our VStack and then just add some padding on it. And then just do that. And now if we tap this, you'll see that we have some padding. Next thing, right? We want to push up all this stuff to the top. Now, let's maximize this again. We want to push all this stuff up to the top. So a good way to do that is using a spacer. We'll say spacer and then say send all that stuff up to the top, right? So if we click on it, you see it's at the top now, which is pretty much what I wanted. Next thing now for the view, I don't like how this is centered. Like it's like this text is just being left aligned. So I want to change it. So I could say, I want, if it's a multi-line text, I want it to be centered. So to add that feature, I just have to add another modifier. So I'll say multi-line text alignment. Doesn't basically read like what you would expect. So if I tap this again, you see it's better centered. So this looks good. The only thing I want to change is one, I don't want the view to just be right here for the sheet, and I don't want to be showing the same thing for each screen. So I'm gonna first, before I do that, let's just cut it. We're gonna create its own view. So in here, I'm just gonna create a new file, a new SwiftUI file, and it's gonna be emergent sheet view. Right, and then I'm going to replace whatever text that we have here with this, right? And now when we jump back to emergency and we scroll down to where we're showing the sheet, I'll just say emergency here, right? And I just want to test this in like a real later. So let's just run this to see how it's acting. And if I click on it, I should see the same sheet view. Cool. All right, perfect. So the next thing we want to do now is basically make it that we can show different data, like based on the data that I clicked on. I want to see. I don't want to see the same thing. So to handle this, we need to know which row the user clicked on, right? So how we can do this is, well, you see, we only have access to emergency within the scope of this. So one way how we can do it, there's a different way how we can do it using navigation destination, and I'll show you that in a different stream. But another way how you can do it is by jumping to our view model, right? And then we're going to add another published variable. And this is going to be var selected emergency. So this is going to be like whatever emergency the user tapped on. And I'll set this to NYC emergency and make it an optional value. So it only will have a value unless you click on something. So what we're going to do is set this as soon as the user clicks on a row. So say view model dot selected emergency equal emergency, right? Now inside our sheet, we can pass in an emergency to this. The only thing is that our emergency sheet view doesn't require emergency. So we'll have to jump here and we're going to update the view to make it that it requires an emergency. I'll just say NYC emergency. And now inside our emergency, now we don't have to use any static code here for the title. We can just say emergency that title, right? Whatever that says there, notification title. And then next thing now for the body, we say emergency dot notification email body. And remember, this is optional, so you might not have it. You want to handle this better, what you could do is do like a if let, and then pretty much if the value is there, then show it. If not, then yeah, don't show it. Now our emergency sheet view wants a preview update, so let's just grab the same one that we use in detail view or in our row view, sorry. So let's go back to row view, scroll down to our preview, and then I can see where it says NYC emergency. We're just going to grab that and then just throw it right inside the sheet. Doing that. Copy this. And then inside our sheet view, we're just going to plop that right in there. Cool. Now our preview is able to use that, but we don't really care about that right now. So now let's jump back to emergency view. And this portion here where we are saying where originally we didn't require emergency, now we do. You see it says, yo, I need an emergency parameter. So the emergency that we want to pass in here is whichever emergency was selected by the user. So we could say cut, or we could say if let selected emergency is equal to selected emergency. And then let's paste this again. And then we're going to pass in selected emergency. So now we're passing in the selected emergency. We check that the value does exist. And if it does, pass it into our emergency. Now, if we run this, fetching the come on, API, move faster. Sometimes it moves slow, sometimes it moves fast. You might need to lower the limit. You went wrong. This is one of those issues. I think this is because like a timeout from taking so long to get the data. So you might have to lower your limit. You see, like it worked this time. So we might have a timeout error. So that's one thing to note. So now the next thing is, let's see if like when we tap on it, the matching data. Saw that one. Now we see on addition or whatever notification issue matches pretty much this. Let's scroll further down. Get someone that we've never really used before or seen. Let's try this one. FD activity. See, it matches pretty much same. It is the same thing. Rain preparedness, same thing. So you can see, and you see the different type of emergencies, the local mass transit emergency, whether you see the date. So right now we've just literally just built an app where we can find out all the emergencies alerts that are probably being sent out to the residents in NYC. So you can be aware of any emergency that might be out there to be aware of. Yes, I use aware a lot just now. But anyways, yeah, so basically, yeah, so we were able to build out our NYC emergencies app using our API from NYC Open Data. And yeah, what else could we do to add more features? I feel like we're pretty good here. So we do handle loading, we handle what was the other thing? The alerts, services is there. This is good. So I'm gonna pause right here for this stream. But if you like this, definitely like, comment, follow.